Hello, and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and I'm flying solo today because got something on my mind that I want to talk about. Something that's frequently on my mind, as a matter of fact, and that is old school strongman training. Something I find endlessly fascinating and something that I think can really inform our own training for greater success in what can only be described as far more privileged times, far easier times. I think there's a lot to learn, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second. Before I do, I want to remind my listeners, if this is your first time listening, if you have not already gotten my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, it's absolutely free. You should go get it. And the reason why is because I designed it to be done in conjunction with your regular training, not in place of what you're already doing. And it is based around the gait pattern or your body's walking pattern, which is really the most fundamental of all movement patterns. And it's the one where if you get strong with that, it is very, very easy to get a lot stronger at a lot of other stuff. So the 9-minute challenge is based around some moves focused on the overall gait pattern, kind of stuff that you can learn in like 30 seconds. You don't need any really specialized knowledge, but it goes a very long way at helping you get a lot stronger. I can go on and on. If you want to read a couple of experiences of people who have done it, you can go to 9minutechallenge.com and scroll down a little bit, and it'll tell you all about a number of the people who've gone through it, some of the strength gains that they've seen, some of the improvements in their own training that they've seen. And there you have it. There you be. 9minutechallenge.com. Go check it out. So, with that said, um, one of the things that I find so cool about the old school strongman training approach is just how focused it is on doing things well and doing them for a very long time. Uh, a lot of the old school strongmen were training and in many cases even performing late in life. Like I think Pyotr Krylov, who's known as the king of kettlebells in his day, he performed in the circus until he was like 60. And I mean, he was still breaking rocks with his hands, snapping chains, carrying around lions that were in cages on a special harness and, lifting the heaviest kettlebells imaginable. Just all sorts of crazy stuff. And one of the things that I think is so valuable about looking into their training is not just that many of them hit records that have never been broken, like Charles Rigoulot, who's a French weightlifter. He one arm snatched like 261 pounds at a body weight of 181 pounds. I don't remember what that is in metric, but believe it or not, well, you can look it up. But suffice it to say, one arm snatching a 261-pound barbell at 181 pounds of body weight is spectacular. Never been topped. And this guy lived in the, I think, late 1800s, very early 1900s. You've got guys like Hermann Gerner, who is a German strongman who one arm deadlift like 734 pounds. Just all sorts of insanity. And keeping in mind that this was at a time before you could just conveniently go to your local grocery store and get food from all over the world and stuff that was safe and nutritious and affordable. Food was expensive, was not always safe, was not always very high quality. Uh, there was not an abundance of a lot of the stuff that we take for granted nowadays. Uh, among those things, stuff like medical care, just basic knowledge of the human body. You get an infection of some sort, and it was very, very common to just keel over and die. That was it. There was no, all right, well, I'll just sleep it off or take some antibiotics. No, it was very often it was lights out. So all of these things put together, consider these and other factors, and then look at what some of these people were able to accomplish. It is nothing short of extraordinary. So whenever you see something like that, somebody or a group of people in particular who are able to achieve just incredible heights of strength at a time where life was tough for pretty much everybody, it is certainly useful to look back and say, okay, well, what exactly was it that they did that allowed them to succeed in the worst of circumstances? Um, it reminds me. I don't know if anybody saw U.S. Marshals. That was it was like supposed to be the sequel to The Fugitive. Um, but didn't get a lot of traction. But there's a really great line in there, and I think it perfectly sums up exactly what my point is here. And it was Robert Downey Jr. plays this agent who his sidearm that he always carries around is a shiny nickel plated pistol. And Tommy Lee Jones, who's the main character in there, tells him that he should get a Glock instead of his favorite pistol because a Glock can work if you drop it in water, if you pour sand in the barrel. It can work under the worst of conditions and therefore is far more reliable. And so it is with any kind of training system that allows you to succeed even when life gets tough, even when things are difficult, and of course, even when things go wrong. So let's look at a couple of the main elements of the old school strongman training system according to Pavel from the SFG2 manual, which has a really great section on this. I'm going to start from the bottom, from number 7. It's train moderately most of the time, maxing in weight or reps only occasionally. There's a tendency for us to want to try to max out and test ourselves every single time we train, or quite frequently, even if not every single time. And I like to liken this to, if, particularly for people who want to get strong primarily, like every time you walked into a class in school, there was another test, you really wouldn't have the chance to learn much of anything because you would always be simply testing what you'd previously learned. The whole point of going to class is so that you can learn new information so that when you have a test, let's say every quarter or maybe once a month, once a semester, you've actually acquired enough knowledge to make it worth testing. And you should look at your training as being roughly the same. It doesn't mean you can't test frequently, meaning, again, once a month, not a big deal. Once a quarter, if you're very strong and your tests are more likely to take a lot more energy out of you. But testing every single time you train is only ensuring that you never get beyond what you've already learned or what you've already trained. Now, number 6 is judiciously mix in other forms of resistance. This one I really like because there are far too many people who find one thing that they really like and they just stick with it. Now, on the strength side of the equation, I see this quite a lot. We'll say in the kettlebell world, but it's also true with barbell people and calisthenics type people. But again, it's really prevalent in the kettlebell world. People will find, oh, I really like the kettlebell. I'm going to start lifting the kettlebell. I'm not going to bother doing anything else, you know. And now, for pure practicality, from the standpoint of pure practicality, it does kind of make sense because maybe you train at home, you don't necessarily have a barbell, but that doesn't mean you can't do calisthenics in addition to your kettlebell training. Doesn't mean you can't invest in some light dumbbells to do some in between work to train the muscles that are not being hit by your favorite kettlebell exercises. Doesn't mean you can't add rubber bands, ankle weights where appropriate. A lot of times, these little changes in resistance make a big difference in your overall training because they allow you to bridge gaps much more quickly than you would otherwise be able to and avoid the inevitable gaps of strength imbalances, which can be a real pain in the joints, honestly. And of course, very frustrating because a lot of times that's one of the things that holds you back from getting any further. So mix in other forms of resistance. There's no reason to be quote unquote minimalist about everything. All right. Number 5, mix in kettlebell juggling and odd lifts. Now, I have to admit, I've done kettlebell juggling in the past, not extensively, but it's not something that I find super duper interesting. But I do think that it's useful to be able to do at least on a low level, like on a foundational level, because kettlebell juggling and odd lifts. In this case, let's use the kettlebell for an example. Odd lifts would be stuff like bent presses, windmills. I think a Turkish get up could be considered an odd lift, honestly, because it is quite a bit different from most of the stuff that people do. And again, if you never learn how to do a Turkish get up, but you can do a bunch of other stuff with a kettlebell, you can still get very strong. But get ups have a lot of really cool in between benefits, such as coordination, uh, the bulletproofing of your shoulder, and a wide variety of other things. So moving at different angles, odd lifts, and doing some kettlebell juggling, something that improves your coordination, also at a very low level can help you to become a little bit more athletic. It's not the same thing as doing athletic activities, but at a minimum, it helps you to fill in that one gap. And again, most people just kind of ignore it. The old time strongmen did a lot of stuff like this. Number 4, use the kettlebell snatch, press, and jerk as the main lifts. Now, I think this goes very well with the previous two, actually, because um, everybody has certain kettlebell movements or body weight movements that they really like and that they really kind of gravitate towards. But again, the issue is that a lot of people will end up gravitating away from the stuff that helps them build that in between strength that is so useful. So maybe you love pull ups and military presses and, say, swings and front squats, all great movements. But doing some in between stuff is the kind of stuff that is also going to help you to get a lot stronger. But making your primary focus on getting a lot stronger at whatever your main lifts are, your pet lifts, we might call them, that is, of course, always a very, very good focus, a very good thing to make your mission. Whereas the stuff, the different resistance that you have access to and the odd lifts and things like that. Maybe you don't care so much how much weight you can move in them. Those are simply there to kind of fill in your gaps, but you want to keep the goal. And if the goal is to get very, very strong, focusing on those few movements that are going to help you to cover the widest territory and get the greatest gains, something that you cannot ignore. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were, just so that, you can get in some odd lifts or some other forms of resistance. Number 3 is vary the exercises every session. And this goes right along with the previous one, using the snatch, press, and the jerk as the main lifts. And varying the exercises every session is another one that I like quite a bit because, the closer you get to a competition, particularly in weight training, but I think this is very much the same with pretty much any sport, the more you want to practice the actual activity that you are going to be competing with, right? Now, if you're not competing, there's no reason to limit yourself to, let's say, 2 to 3 movements only. So one of the things that I've done a lot with my students throughout the years is that this is a really, really great approach to strength training is you'd have an A day, a B day, and an A day. Now, previously I mentioned maybe your pet lifts are pull up, military press, swing, and the front squat. Maybe that's your A day, okay? Your B day might be something like, let's say, a row instead of a pull up, a dip instead of the military press, a lunge instead of the squat, and we'll say like a high pull instead of the swing. So alternating A B A one week and then B A B the next week is a very, very good way of making sure you're covering more ground, avoiding those annoying and nagging issues that come up from over focusing on a couple of exercises to the exclusion of all these other ones. And it's a lot more fun, to be quite honest. And when the time comes and you say, you know what, I really want to see, I kind of want to, test my military press. Well, then you can do a short, let's say, 4-week peaking cycle where you just work on ramping up your military press, see how much you can press. And once you've done that, again, test yourself every once in a while. It's not a problem. And once you've done that, and you have your, this new PR, then you move on and try to do the same thing with a different movement, and then just maintain whatever it's going to take to keep that PR relatively high. But this is the sort of a thing, varying the kind of movements that you do, that I think is going to be the best for most people's longevity. And the old school strongmen, even though they had pet lifts, Arthur Saxon, for instance, was this 300-pound bent press. That was like something he would do on an almost nightly basis in his circus shows. A variety of other different movements that were popular back in those days that were done by no shortage of other people. I mentioned Pyotr Krylov earlier. He could hold 2 90-pound kettlebells out at his sides at arm's length. Everybody had something that they could do, and they were doing a lot of different exercises while maintaining those. So something very, very worth keeping in mind. But again, the key is that they varied their training very, very often. Number 2, train 3 to 4 times a week. I personally, I like training 5 to 6 times a week, but the key to making sure that that actually means anything is that you have to reduce the overall intensity. So you have to let the frequency do the work if that's going to be the case. So you might have one hard day a week, two easy days, two medium days. That would be a good 5 day a week session. And if you're going to do 6 days a week, I don't really recommend it. I think if you're going to do 6 days a week, two of those should probably be something like some kind of cardio or work capacity training, not just more strength training. Honestly, 3 to 4 days a week is more than enough for most people. And as a matter of fact, Sig Klein was a German American strongman who was just crazy strong. I mean, he's 147 pounds. He could do what was called a Steinborn squat with 305 pounds. And a Steinborn squat would be where you would take a barbell, tip it over on its side, and then you would wedge yourself in the middle, and then you would sort of bring it over onto your shoulders, and then you would have to start at the bottom position and stand up from there. He could do that for like 305 for 5 reps at 147 pounds. He could do 19 freestanding handstand push-ups off the edge of a bench. Crazy strong dude. I mean, that's not even the half of the stuff that he could do. That was just some of the stuff that comes to mind now. He could military press a pair of 75-pound dumbbells for like 15 reps per arm. Just, again, unreal strong. Well, past the age of 35, he decided he was just going to train his strength 3 days a week for an hour at a time. And you see pictures of him in his 60s, and he looks far better than most influencers in their 20s who live in a gym. So suffice it to say, 3 to 4 times a week for strength for most people is plenty. Anything you do in the in-between days should be maybe something like cardio or movement-based stuff to kind of keep your overall capacity in good working order. And then the number one, very interestingly, and again, this is Pavel's list, but I wanted to save this one for last because I think it'll shock a lot of people, and I think it will also inspire a lot of people to take action because in many ways, this is probably the easiest one to get started with, and it is to start the day with a morning recharge. Now, one of the things about the strongmen, particularly the ones whose careers lasted for decades and whose names are still remembered, people like Eugene Sandow, some of the other people that I've mentioned up to this point, apart from Arthur Saxon, because he got ill during World War I and died of pneumonia. Had he not served, I'm sure he would have lived quite a bit longer. But the morning recharge was really essential. And one of the things about it, and in fact, this was one of the things that I started doing first when I got into kettlebell training. Believe it or not, I got Pavel's books, Relax and to Stretch and Super Joints. And every morning I would do like a 15 to 20 minute movement routine. And I kid you not, I think it really played a huge role in maintaining that youthful mobility that I have even to this day. Now, even though I've changed what I did from 14 years ago when I got started doing my own daily morning routine, I've always kept proper movement and quality movement as a very, very high priority in my overall training. And I definitely think that one of the things that I find coolest about the morning recharge is that it allows you to kind of like take the opportunity that most people just skip by and prioritize yourself first thing in the morning, because most people wake up and they just start reacting to the day. And instead, what you want to do is, if you've got anything of note that you want to accomplish, you're not going to be able to pour your own efforts out from an empty cup. You really need to be working at your highest possible capacity. And making loving decisions for yourself right from the get-go is the first thing that pretty much everybody needs to do. And I'll tell you something, it is far easier to change your mind and change your mindset by working through your body than it is solely by trying to work on your mind and thinking positive thoughts and stuff like that. That stuff's all good, but taking action toward your own betterment first thing in the morning is a game changer, and a game changer, quite honestly. So the morning recharge from a practical standpoint, in terms of your overall training, is probably the ultimate in longevity work in terms of your performance. Okay, there are other things in terms of what we would ordinarily call longevity, like your cardiovascular health and grip strength and leg strength and stuff like that. But the taking the time to move your joints through a range of motion that they probably are not going to get through your day-to-day activities, making sure that you're not only maintaining it, but in some cases are kind of starting to dissipate the salt and calcium deposits that can settle into the joints as you get older, making sure that you are getting the synovial fluid moving around and keeping the joint healthy, and also making sure that the muscles that attach to the joint are getting the TLC or tender loving care that they also desperately need, and moving in and out of ranges of motion and angles that you ordinarily do not do, but doing so at a low level that you can do on a daily basis and just maintain your overall abilities, makes it so that when you do show up for your training session, whether that's first thing in the morning, once you get home from work, on your lunch break, whatever, you are already basically pretty warmed up. I mean, I would still warm up a little bit, but a lot of times you're going to find that your body doesn't feel like it's starting off cold. It's like it's already been buzzing this whole day because you've started off by getting it back in working order. And this is one of the things that I've discovered because I've made it a point these last couple of weeks to start every morning off, no matter what, with a morning recharge. And it is astonishing how much easier my training is because I can jump in with confidence knowing my body's already been primed to move. So my warm-ups are a lot shorter. They're a lot more to the point, and my training has just been spectacular, like really, really, really good. So the old-time strongmen were onto something. Take care of yourself first thing in the morning. Make sure that morning recharge is a part of your daily diet of activities, even if it's only a couple minutes. I'm telling you, like the difference that you're going to start to notice. You have to give it time. First day, two might not notice a whole lot, but as the days and the weeks wear on, and your body starts to feel as though it's turned the clock back, or anybody who was a mechanic in the 70s and was able to turn back the odometers when it was just frowned on and not completely illegal, maybe you would remember. Uh, but this is exactly what it feels like. It feels like you're turning the clock back on your body, that you are restoring your natural and buoyant movability from your youth, and that you are still able to apply that with all of the wisdom and knowledge you have acquired about your own training and gaining ever since. So, once again, from 7 back to 1, train moderately most of the time, maxing in weight or reps only occasionally. Number 6, judiciously mix in other forms of resistance. Number 5, mix in kettlebell juggling and odd lifts. Number 4, use the kettlebell snatch, press, and jerk as the main lifts. Take from that, regardless whatever implement you're using, find some main lifts that you want to really get good at and make those your main focus, but also sprinkle in some assistance work, as mentioned previously. Number 3, vary the exercises every session. Unless you are really trying to peak with a couple of different movements, there's no reason to do them to the exclusion of everything else. Number 2, train 3 to 4 times a week. And again, that's strength specifically, but I think that if you are going to be doing, let's say, 5-6 days a week of training, tossing in some specialized movement days, maybe some cardio work, highly recommended, very, very useful to do. That's a great way to just make sure that you're keeping your ticker strong as well as the rest of your body. And number 1, start your day off with a morning recharge. From a practical standpoint, you are going to be in a lot better position to continue to gain as you get older. Your joints are going to feel better. Your muscles are going to move better. You're going to be more focused. Might even have a nice sort of like energizing effect on the body. So perhaps you don't need as much coffee just to get through your day. And even more important, I think, over the long run, is that it teaches you to prioritize yourself so that you can be more present for your family. You can be more present for your friends. You can be more focused. And again, you can make sure that you are not robbing yourself to pay others, but rather that you are reaping the rewards of making loving decisions for yourself first thing in the morning. So there's no reason not to do that. Lots of great benefits. And doing stuff like that may not get you to a 300-pound bent press like Arthur Saxon, or a 734-pound one-arm deadlift like Herman Gerner, or any of these other insane feats. But one thing that it will do is help make sure that you are staying strong and getting stronger for the rest of your life, and that you are moving in a direction that is going to make you enjoy that much stronger life a whole lot more. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, I encourage you to subscribe if you have not already done that. like this if you're watching it on YouTube or some other place where you can just click like and share it with somebody. If you think somebody else would like to hear this, maybe they want to figure out a way to get started in their own life so they can start being consistent with a routine. This would be a very good way to start. And I should mention too, you'll only really get any information on this if you're on my email list, but I'm coming out with a new program. It's what I like to call a guide. So it's kind of a sweeping overview of the topic at hand called the Morning Recharge. And it is focused specifically on exactly what we talked about here with the Morning Recharge, but done in a very unique way that I think a lot of people are going to like, that is going to cover a lot of ground and hopefully uncover a lot of PRs very, very quickly. You have to do the whole thing. I'm convinced, however, that if you go through it, you are going to see a huge leap forward in your overall, not just health, not just strength, but physical vitality as well. So there you have it. There you be. Time to run. Thank you for listening. And as always, have fun and happy training.